Hey, welcome to the Big Ten Huddle. I am your host, Zach Guggenheim. And today we have a very special guest from IMS Radio, Larry France, joining us to represent the Maryland Terrapins. Larry, thank you for finally filling the void that has been so empty over the past year and a half that we've been doing this show. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to do it and give you the Maryland perspective on things. I know you guys like to rip on Maryland a little bit. And so I saw one of the shows where you're making fun of Maryland and said, is there anyone from Maryland who can explain what's going on there? Please come help us. And so I wrote a DM to JR and said, hey, I'd be happy to come on and do my part to help fill in the gaps for you guys. And he said, yeah, that's great. And so here we are.
Well, we are very, very grateful for you to come on and educate us. And I have no doubt that you will educate me as well as our listeners. We're very, very excited to have you on the show. So thanks for being here. Before we kind of get going, a couple things. First, make sure you like, subscribe, memberships. We're doing memberships. So feel free to do that with us. Follow us on socials. But before we kind of dive into the actual topics, Larry, I want to just ask what's your journey into Maryland sports? You were telling me a little bit this pre-show, but how did you get involved? Maybe like the 2-minute version with IMS and I believe 247 as well, right?
Yeah, I just grew up in Maryland, in Baltimore, and my father went to Maryland. And so just like a lot of kids, their dad's bringing them the games. And so I'm 52. I'm older than you guys. I was born in 73. I started watching Maryland in the late 70s. I remember primarily basketball. Albert King, you guys aren't going to remember him unless you're a Maryland guy, but he's one of the greats, and he was my first favorite. And then Boomer Esiason, you guys all know that name from Maryland. Maryland in the late 70s and the 80s was, I won't say a football powerhouse, but they were certainly relevant in the ACC. They won 6 ACC titles over like a 10-year span, and one year were ranked number 1 to start the year and all that kind of stuff. Bobby Ross was the coach there. And then over the years, it's just been in my blood, Maryland fan. And I am associated with someone who's very good with music technology. And we had the ability to do podcasting and live streaming about 12-ish years ago, 11 years ago. And so I wrote to Jeff Ehrman, who's the owner of Inside Maryland Sports on the 24/7 Sports Network, and said, hey, I have this ability to do this. Do you want to do a show? And he said, yeah. And so we started. And like I was telling you before the show, we were awful at first, but at speaking publicly. But over time, we've gotten better. And the show gets more and more popular. We get more fans. You know how it works, all that stuff. So.
Very cool. And the name of the show is just Inside Maryland, or what's the name of your show?
Inside Maryland Sports. You could go to InsideMarylandSports.com, which will take you to Maryland.247sports.com. The show that we do that's associated with it is just called IMS Radio or Inside Maryland Sports Radio. Okay. If you search for that on YouTube or any of your podcast apps, you'll see it, because we do it live on YouTube and then it gets rendered down as an audio podcast as well.
Great. And when do you guys do your live shows typically?
Usually we do Wednesday nights, but lately, because of everything that's been going on with basketball and the AD and the basketball coach, we've done 7 shows in the past 12 days, something like that. But normally we're weekly.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, you guys have had a lot going on between the tournament.
Crazy.
Yeah. Which we'll touch on a little bit at the end. This is not basketball focused or even Maryland program focused. It's football focused, but there's a lot going on at Maryland that we should at least pick your brain on a little bit before we end the show.
A lot. Yeah.
Yeah. But without further ado, I think what a lot of people, whether they're watching live or they will come back and watch this is the topic that they will want to know about, which is how you would evaluate Mike Locksley's tenure. And I think in two ways. I think you personally, Larry, as you're connected to the program, but then also how the fan base, the Maryland fan base views him. Because I think from the outside looking in, I think a lot of people have different opinions. So I'd love to know both yours and the Maryland fan base's thoughts on how to evaluate his tenure.
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is remember what Maryland's situation was when he entered. Right? Everything's relative. If he had the same record he has now and he was coaching Ohio State, he'd have been fired after 2 seasons or 3 seasons. But he's coaching Maryland that doesn't have the history and prestige and resources that Ohio State has. He came in when, I don't know if you remember, Maryland had a player die in practice. DJ Durkin was the coach, Jordan McNair. An awful situation that happened, and there was some negligence on the part of the coaches. They didn't contact medical quickly enough, and I don't know if there was a cover up, but they tried to protect themselves a little bit, and the whole staff got fired. And part of that, Jordan McNair was a local recruit, and in the local area around Maryland, they call it the DMV. I'm sure you've heard that. And there used to be a hashtag DMV to UMD. That was the way they recruited. The entire local community was anti-Maryland.
Wow.
Hated, like the local coaches and players and the whole football scene was, Maryland is toxic to us right now because Jordan McNair is one of theirs. And Locksley came in, and he was really the only person. When I say the only one, I think the only one who could come in at that time and repair what happened there. And he came in. The first year they went 2-10. They lost 25 transfers or something like that. And he didn't have a full year to recruit. And he repaired that relationship. Locksley himself has lost a son. And so he bonded with the McNairs over that. And they did some joint press conferences together. And it kind of healed the community with Maryland. And if you go back to that and consider where Maryland was, and they weren't going to bowl games at that time either. So they weren't even that good on the field. And then you add that on top of it. If you consider that where they were at that time, it's not a bad tenure. He's stabilized the program. First year 2-10. Then it was the COVID year. They went 2-3, but they beat Penn State and looked a lot better until Taulia Tagovailoa was in his freshman year. And then the 3 years after that, they went 7-6, 8-5, and 8-5, which for Maryland, like I was saying, if it was Ohio State, no, you get fired. At Maryland, when you're coming off the back of what he came in, it's respectable. It's foundation building. And then last year was really bad. Obviously, they went there was a step back. You can't, every year they got better. You can't do that indefinitely. They had a step back last year. It was really bad. There was issues all over the field, particularly the offensive line. But I think most people kind of view it as like, okay, that's a bad year. Has he reached his potential? Is 7-6 and 8-5 his potential at Maryland? Is that the peak he's ever going to be? And I think I'm kind of in that camp. I hate to say that. He's been on our show. I've met him. He's a great guy. Everyone who meets him loves him. That's why he recruits so well. Everyone loves him. So I think people would feel bad about kind of being critical of him, but he does have weaknesses on the field, as you know. He's discipline, clock management stuff, time management, sort of those kind of things. He's gotten better, but he's got those kind of issues. But the recruiting's great. And next year the freshmen coming in this year are ranked 25th in the country, which is very good for Maryland. And they have, sorry, my dog's howling in the background if you hear that. I apologize for that. That's what that weird noise is. But the recruiting class is really good. 25th in the country. They had, I think, 7 or 8 4-stars. I can't remember. And next year, they're already off to a great start. They have the number 2 player in the entire country, Zion Ely, and I think he's in the mid-20s, an offensive lineman named Emmanuel Iheanacho. And so that's looking like it could be a top 25 or top 20 as well. We'll see. So the recruiting, right? So it's this limbo. Is that the peak that he's going to be? If it is, are you content with that at Maryland when Maryland's not Ohio State? They don't have those resources. Are you content with getting a bowl game every year, winning 8 games, and being semi-respectable? Or do you want more than that? I want more than that. Is it possible at Maryland? hard to say.
Yeah.
So
I think
that's kind of
I think that's maybe the hardest question about it is what is this the ceiling? And because I think there were potential even for those 8-5 seasons to do better, but then they they lose to a Northwestern or they lose. And I don't want to throw, because I think what you're saying is actually really valid and really helpful. Dave, a friend of the show, he says they got a 5-star on board. Who's going to steal him? Which is one of the difficulties with recruiting, right? Like there is the reality that you guys have that 5-star recruit, but you're gonna have to fight him off. And Dave then also he mentions who could do better than 8-5 at Maryland. Maybe it's not the coach.
my
Speak
point
to that. Yeah.
Right. So who could do better? Well, Nick Saban could do better, right? But is that real? Is Nick Saban going to come to Maryland? Who can they get that's going to do better? That's always where you're in that kind of limbo area. Maryland basketball had a coach named Mark Turgeon for every year, and they called it Turgatory because he was just good enough, but not getting Maryland to elite in basketball where they want to be to not get fired. So he was there for 10 years. And so it's like the same kind of thing in football. Is there somebody who's going to be better? First of all, he's not going anywhere right now. He's done well enough considering, like I said, the expectations when he started, at least even if next year they go 1-11 or 2-10 or something crazy, maybe, but he's got at least 2 years. So that's not even something to think about yet. And you hope for better than that too, but I don't think he's going anywhere anyway. So the question about who would they get is not even worth to think about for another year or two at least.
Yeah.
So, but and then about who's going to steal Zion Ely. Trust me, every Maryland fan is worried about the same thing. The players come in, they do well, and then Alabama offers CJ Dupree money, and he goes, and Maryland's become a farm system in some regard. But I will say this: the House settlement is going to change things for Maryland, I think, a lot. Maryland, there's the famous $20 million that Ohio State had last year for their roster. Maryland had one, something like that, and now all of a sudden they're going to have 14. And Locksley's a good recruiter. Well, that's how you get Zion Ely, because Locksley has never had money. And then this year coming in, the top 25 class, they got money now. And Locksley's a good recruiter. Okay, well, $20 million to $1 million, you're not keeping anybody home. But when you got $14 million, and Ohio State's going to spend even more than that, but they're going to keep some guys now. They're going to get their 7 or 8 4- and 5-star guys a year. And if you can do that for 4 years, then all of a sudden you've got pretty much a 2 deep of 4 and 5-star guys, and then maybe you compete. That's the hope. That's the long-term hope. Yeah. Because right now they have NFL level players, and they generally can cobble together a first team that's competitive with the big boys. But over the course of a season, you wear down, you get injuries, there's fatigue, and then even within a game, when they're subbing and coming at you in waves, and Maryland can't do that, you can't hang. But that's the hope. The DMV has a very fertile recruiting ground. And if you just put that fence up around the DMV and you can get those 7 or 8 or 10 4- and 5-star guys a year, then that's the hope that Maryland, with the House settlement money now, maybe they can do that. That's the hope.
Yeah, and I think that's a really helpful perspective, Larry, because you look at the state of the Big Ten, and obviously Maryland, they're in a great spot because of the conference they're in, but it's a double-edged sword because you got to deal with Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, USC, Oregon. So you've got to deal with these big dogs and these big budgets.
Yeah.
And so I think your point is really, really valid about the budget. If maybe it's not 20 million, but if 14 million is on the table, you can keep some of not just the top tier guys, but a lot of the depth.
Yes.
And I think you're absolutely right. Like you look at the difference between the top dogs and Ohio State is a really good case study, and Michigan the year before that.
Right.
I mean, they had waves of line. I mean, Michigan's
Yep.
line against Alabama this year in the bowl game,
Yep.
like their second string defensive line just wrecked Jalen Milroe all game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what Maryland has had. And so I think that's a really helpful point that you make. That even the depth would be a factor in some of the inconsistencies, even in the good years. And so I really appreciate that. That's really good.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when you talk about, I've heard you guys make fun of the Maryland collapse. We make fun of it too, by the way. You're not the only one. The only way to get you guys to stop doing that is to win some games. And then we'll stop it as well, because it's true. They win in September. They're 4-0 and they're on the verge of getting ranked. And then fatigue hits and injuries start to happen. And then Big Ten brutal lines come in, and you got one after the other. And then Maryland starts to lose. And the only way they're going to lose to, like you said, Northwestern or whoever. They've had other bad losses too. You're just going to be inconsistent if you don't have the depth to handle that kind of schedule.
Yeah. Well, and that's I feel like it's a good transition point to like what did go sideways in 2024 for the Terps. Because I think, again, they started hot. And then, they have that big win against USC, which nobody was expecting. But then you also have the blowout loss. I shouldn't say nobody was expecting. I think USC was up and down. But like it was, I think you see the high highs of USC and the low lows of Northwestern. Like what was it, just depth issues, or were there other things going on too?
More than depth last year. They lost, obviously they lost Taulia, Tungavailoa, and Billy Edwards came in, and he was good. He was better than people expected. He wasn't that big a drop off, but it was a drop off, but not that big a drop off. The bigger issue was that their offensive line was not good. That was a much bigger issue. Roman Hemby is a pretty good running back who's transferred to Indiana now, but he didn't have openings, and he's not the kind of running back who makes people miss. If you give him an opening, he's got home run potential. So we'll see what he does at Indiana next year. If Cignetti keeps the Cignetti magic going with those guys, Hemby could have a great year with Indiana if their line performs. So the line was really bad. The defense wasn't as good as expected. People thought the defense was going to be one of their better defenses because they had a lot of depth on the defensive line for the first time under Locksley's tenure, or so they thought. And it didn't pan out, and it didn't work out. The defensive coach, the defense coordinator, is gone now.
Yeah.
And I heard you guys talking about that, how they lost the guy to
Group of Five school. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But I'll just so you know, Locksley has this thing where he refuses to embarrass his coaches. And he tells them that they're gone and lets them find a place to go. He won't publicly do that. He lets them find a place to go and announce on their own. So it's not that he left Maryland. Yeah. Locksley told him, go, find a space, find somewhere to go and go. So that's what happened with that there. Locksley, in particular, with his own guys. So
yeah,
he has a thing with doing that. So yeah, the defense was bad and the offensive line was bad. They had really good skill position guys, but when the offensive line isn't good, it doesn't help. The USC game you were talking about, we obviously we preview the games and we talk about them. We talked about that as a potential upset spot because of what was happening with the travel across coasts and the record for teams that traveled across from East Coast to West Coast was really bad, or vice versa. And so we all said, this is an opportunity here. Maryland could win this game. So when you said no one expected that, we kind of said,
you guys got it.
Not that it necessarily was going to happen, but that the chances were better than maybe people thought because of the travel. And it happened, which was good. But you're right. It doesn't matter when the rest of the game is so bad. So yeah, the 4-8's not good. It's not good enough. And if he struggles like that again this year, the seat's going to start getting hot.
Yeah. couple things before we go to commercial that I just want to highlight. One is I have appreciated, Larry, how you've humanized Locksley for us. Because I think, when we're on the show, especially when we don't get to talk to people inside the program or who are really locked into the program, they're just a football coach.
Mm-hmm.
And it's helpful to hear you talk about how he's healed the community and how he's like how he doesn't shame his coaches. I think that's actually like that's a really helpful perspective. And I think it's, the type of show we want to run is a show that's not just, well, this person's a loser. We have our fun, obviously, but I really appreciate you highlighting both Locksley's desire to have dignity for his coaches, even if, for Brian Williams, who's, say, hey, I want you to go, but, go find a spot. And also how he helped the community heal after the McNair death. I knew it was bad. I don't think I realized just how devastating it was for that whole community.
Awful.
That's just really helpful.
It was really bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for that. That's really good. Couple questions here before, or a couple folks in the chat that I want to just mention before we go to break. But Billy Tuesday, friend of the show, saying there is some talent in the DMV. They could do well if they get it together. I think your point exactly.
Right.
And then Dave's here. He's got a question. Did they fire Josh Gaddis? Is he worth -14 or is he worth 14 in a game? Is Gaddis still there? I didn't think he was. Is he? Yeah.
No. Pep Hamilton.
Okay.
So, yeah. So Locksley was asked in the, and he had a press conference recently about who's going to call plays. And he said he's not going to call them anymore. So we'll see how that goes. I think he called them last year. There's some maybe it was a mixture or whatever, but so who knows? We'll see. Honestly, for me, next year is get to 6, get to a bowl game, keep the recruiting intact, and get 4 years of 8 to 10 4-star guys, and then see what happens when you've got a top 25 roster. Can you be a top 25 team?
Yeah.
Right. That's what next year's. I don't see how with the roster they have, regardless of who the coaches are, the hope get the 6.
Yeah.
Even though the schedule's easy, get the 6. That's the goal. Keep the roster, keep the recruits.
Yeah.
Malik Washington. I don't know if you know him. He's the incoming quarterback, 4-star, very highly thought of. And a lot of people, you hear comments about how he's a program changing type quarterback. We'll see. But him, Zion Ely, all these guys, these really highly rated recruits, keep them coming and stack them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the goal. And Chris L had a basketball question, so I'm gonna star that for the end when we get to the kind of the tail end for you. But we're gonna take a quick break, and then we'll be back with talking about Taulia. Speaking of program changing quarterbacks, we'll be talking about Taulia's impact. But let's go to a commercial real quick.
Homefield is your go-to destination for premium collegiate apparel with a passion for comfort and a flair for vintage design. Homefield brings you gear that is comfortable and stylish. With over 150 colleges to choose from, Homefield digs deep into the archives, uncovering forgotten logos, iconic mascots, and legendary moments to create one-of-a-kind apparel. Use my code TBTH for 15% off for new customers, or use my link in the description.
Back on the Big Ten Huddle with Larry France from Inside Maryland Sports Radio. I just want to give a shout out to my guy JR. We have to cancel our 9:00 show because of storms that are in his area. He lost power, not getting it back. But he made all the graphics for this because he's the man. Like he's I just come on, show up. I maybe have a few questions, but he makes the graphics. He makes the live stream. He makes everything go. So JR, we miss you, buddy. Obviously, thanks for recording that Homefield ad. Make sure you check out Homefield, THBH. Is that the code? 15% off. Clearly, I don't have that memorized.
TBTH, the Big Ten Huddle, right?
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Larry. Thanks.
Yeah.
There's gonna be so many jabs at me for that now. I appreciate it. You got my back. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit earlier how there wasn't much of a drop, like there was some drop off, but not a ton of drop off between Taulia and Billy Edwards. And had been kind of our read on it preseason last year was Billy Edwards we think is going to be pretty good. And we think he's going to be pretty good at Wisconsin too. But just talk about the loss, maybe not just in the performing of the quarterback position, but just legacy and how big of a loss that was for Maryland.
Well, one of the biggest is who's the star on the team, who's the draw. Just in that regard, Maryland has attendance problems, as you guys know. It's awful. There are a lot of reasons for that. They're in the middle of, they're in between, half hour in between two NFL teams, right? That's a really big problem for Maryland with attendance. There's a lot of other issues besides that, but when you have Taulia Tagovailoa, at least you have some name. You have a face, a celebrity, a star that you can market. So that's good. That was a big thing. That's one thing. And also, he wasn't the best quarterback in the history of the Big Ten, clearly, but he's the all-time leading passer in the history of the Big Ten. He has more yards than any other quarterback ever in the Big Ten, which is crazy. Yeah. But he did that. And so you're losing that. You're losing that ability. And Billy Edwards didn't have the same level of passing ability that Taulia had. So you're losing that. I'll say on the other side, Taulia had what seemed like panic issues, like poise issues, not just within a play, but if things started to go wrong, they went wrong. Yeah. They would be in a game for a quarter and something would happen and it would just seem like, oh, here we go. And then next thing you know, it's 50-7 Iowa. And it's like, what happened? They're not 50-7 better than Maryland. They're pretty close, right? Like talent-wise, what happened? And so in that regard, some people kind of viewed it maybe as an opportunity for an improvement. Also, he was loath to run. And I don't know if it stems back to his brother's injuries or if it was something he wanted to just protect himself for a future career, what have you. He was afraid. Who knows? You're getting slammed by 250-pound muscle machine linebackers. Like maybe he just didn't want to do it. I don't know. But he didn't like to run. And so Billy came in and Billy ran. So that was an improvement. So there were pluses and minuses to it.
Sure.
And obviously the record got worse, but I think that has more to do with a lot of the rest of the roster than just him. Like the offensive line in particular.
Yeah, I think it's helpful. I appreciate. I sense that this is kind of where you go with it, which I appreciate. Is like the legacy impact was a lot bigger than the performance impact.
I think so.
Which, the offensive line, you can cure a lot of ills with a good offensive line. Or you could have a lot of problems with a bad offensive line. And I think, go back the Michigan State game. I think JR and I were split on that. JR was like, I think Michigan State's lines are better than Maryland's. And I was like, I think Maryland, I think Ty Felton's going to go off. Of course, JR was right and I was wrong. But he made the point that it was the line play that was going to be the difference.
Do you remember that game? Maryland had the lead, a touchdown lead in the ball with a minute and a half to go. And they had a 4th and 1, I think, in Michigan State territory. Locksley punted, and he got
forgot about that.
Grilled for that. And this is what I'm talking about, the game management stuff, where sometimes people have a problem with his decisions. You on 4th and 1, you line up and you go get the first down and win the game. I almost said a word. Go win the game.
Yeah.
We grilled him for that too. We love him, but we grilled him for that. We love him personally. We have all the issues with some of the game stuff, but
absolutely.
And then they threw a 70-yard bomb. Then Maryland had a chance to go down and win it and didn't. And Michigan State goes down and kicks a field goal and wins the game. So they had the game won. They get a first down there, then maybe you are the one who was right. Because Ty Felton did go off. He went off in basically every game last year.
Yeah.
So that was an
that
awful game.
Was that the Nick Marsh game where Nick Marsh had like 200 some yards and
the receiver?
Yeah.
I didn't remember his name, but yeah, I think it is Aiden Childs. Yeah, they threw the bomb. That was really bad. Had they won that, they would have had the standard 4-0 Maryland start before the collapse in October.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, the point, and maybe wasn't as much stated in the Michigan State game, but just in general, the line play was really hindered them, and it sounds like the defensive deficiencies as well.
Yeah, the secondary ended up being really poor when they thought they had brought in some guys, particularly through the transfer portal, who they thought were going to be really good, and it wasn't very good. The defensive line that they thought was going to be, they thought had a chance to be really good, like upper level Big Ten defensive line, because they had depth for the first time. And Jordan Phillips is probably going to get drafted in the draft in the 3rd or 4th round.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't materialize that way. So maybe some of it is the offense was giving the ball away too quickly, and when you have the defense on the field that long, then right. So
yeah.
So
we don't want to dwell on a 4-8 season. With spring, everything's budding right now.
Yes.
Spring hopes are alive. And, you guys have a new, transfer quarterback in Justin Martin. Obviously, Malik Washington is waiting in the wings as well. Everybody's optimistic in the spring. But you look at the schedule, you have a new defensive coordinator who I think even as of last show, I've kind of changed a little bit. I think unfairly ripping Locksley, maybe per usual. But Ted Monachino comes in as defensive coordinator, and it was not a clean process, but he's there. He has a lot of experience.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the hopes as you look at this program? Like maybe the key things that make you say they can get to 6 wins.
Yeah. Well, with Monachino, Maryland is Maryland. They're not going to get Ohio State's defensive coordinators and Michigan's coordinators. They have a different pool that they're pulling from. So I think it's pretty good. I think I'm okay with it. I like it. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. And obviously it depends on the talent he's working with as well. I'm from Baltimore. He was the Ravens coach for 5 years. I think he was with the Ravens for 5-ish years. And so I'm okay with that. I think he could do a good job. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. In terms of next year, you mentioned Justin Martin. I kind of did the deep dive on Justin Martin. I watched the entire game, UCLA and Penn State game with Justin Martin, and he looked pretty good. I did the same. If you remember, MJ Morris transferred from NC State to Maryland the year before, and there was going to be a QB battle between MJ Morris and Billy Martin going into last season, Billy Edwards. Mm-hmm. And Billy Edwards won it. And I predicted that because I watched all of MJ's games with NC State, and I read their message boards, and I came away thinking he shows some flashes, but I don't think he's that good. And I said so on our show leading into the season. I think Billy's going to win it, and he did. I say that to say that I'm not a homer when I watched this game, and I actually was like, okay, Justin Martin, he's got some stuff. He showed some zip on his ball. He did some checkdowns in that game. He almost never, I don't think once maybe threw the ball deep, and that was partially game plan probably, but also Penn State's defensive line was insane. Yeah. They're in the backfield. Yep. So he's got to get it out quick. He's 6'4" and he's fast. So he's not going to be doing Lamar Jackson type moves in the backfield, but he ran the RPO pretty well. I think he's going to get some yards with that. I think he's going to be able to pass it well enough. And if you go to the 247sports.com transfer portal rankings, he ranks higher than Billy Edwards. And I can see why. I've seen a lot of Billy Edwards. I've seen the one game just like everybody. I don't think it'd be that weird if he's better than Billy Edwards next year.
Yeah, I think it's a fair take.
So it's I'm not saying definitely, but because he's played one game, so who knows? But
Right.
there's sort of a ceiling for Billy. He's a tough guy, and he's poised, and he's got a lot of the things that you want a quarterback to have. Martin's got way more ability. So we'll see if that pans out that way or not. So that's part of the reason I'd say, hey, maybe they lost Hemby to Indiana, but all year long, everyone was clamoring for the backup, a guy named Nolan Ray, who's going to be a starter this year. He makes people miss, and he had highlight reel runs last year, many of them, and people were clamoring for him to take over the spot from Hemby anyway last year.
Yeah.
So the fact that he left, you don't have both of them anymore, so that's a problem. But they have other backups they like as well. So they're losing their receivers, which both are very good. One for sure getting drafted, one maybe. Caden Prather maybe. Ty Felton for sure, probably third round. So the question is going to be, can they improve the offensive line? They've made some pickups in the portal. They have a really highly rated, high 4-star coming in next year, offensive lineman. Can they cobble together at least an average line? Can you get that? Give Martin some time, give him some holes, give Nolan Ray some holes. And I think they're going to be way more run focused next year with the option and with Nolan Ray. Obviously you lose the receivers. So that's where I think the hope comes in, and the schedule's not that daunting. So that provides a little bit of hope as well. So 6 wins, I think is doable. I give it maybe a 50-50 shot, something like that they'll get to 6 wins.
Yeah.
Anything more than that would be, first of all, offer me 6 right now. I say, yes, I sign on the dotted line. Yeah. Anything more than that, you're going, hey, this is really a great turnaround from last year. And if they get less than that, then you're talking about Locksley on the hot seat again. So,
yeah, I was just looking as you were talking. I was thinking about that Justin Martin Penn State game. That was a big noon kickoff game, and UCLA.
Was it? I didn't remember that.
It was big noon kickoff, and it was UCLA traveling east.
Yeah.
So in the raucous crowd, which I think, just to go back to your point, Penn State was never threatened. I remember watching that game. I was getting my car inspected while I was watching this game on my phone. So, it's memories, man. But I remember watching him in that game and thinking, he does not seem rattled. He doesn't he didn't make a ton of plays, but with that defense, it's hard to make plays.
They were in on him.
So I think you have I think it's one game.
Right.
But I think that's a good perspective. And then to your point about the schedule, I think we rated it as either the easiest or the second easiest, which in the Big Ten, in the New World Big Ten, that still doesn't mean much, right? Because you still have Indiana on the schedule, you still have Michigan on the schedule, Illinois is on the schedule, Washington, who's hot and cold, is on the schedule. Who knows what Wisconsin's going to be? There's a ton of pressure on Fickle this year. But you don't draw Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon.
Right.
That's huge.
Right.
And you have a lot of games that are toss-ups, or the degree of difficulty is hard, but it's not Ohio State, Penn State, or Oregon.
Right. It's not a 5% chance. It's a 40% chance.
Yeah.
Or a 50% chance, maybe, depending on how things work out. So, and if you can get, and they have the 3 non-conference games, it's a really easy slate, and they've got to be 3-0 in that. If they're not 3-0 in that, they got real problems.
Yeah.
They've got to win those 3, and then you got to figure out how to go 3-6 against that schedule. which they could do. They could do that. If everyone's still wanting them to get more offensive linemen in the spring portal because the line was bad and then they lost guys too.
Yeah.
So everyone's still very worried about that, and myself included. And that's why I won't. That's why I say give me 6. Let's see them get some more offensive linemen. Let's see the offensive line open up some holes, give some protection.
Yeah.
We'll see. Can they get some more players there? That's a real big concern. And they don't have any. Their defense. We were talking about this on the show. Who's the big name player really on the whole team, but the defense too? Really, the biggest player we were thinking is Caleb Wheatland. And do you even know who he is? Yeah. So, right. You guys study the Big Ten. You don't even know who he is. He's probably the biggest name coming back. They don't have a lot of big names at all. Really, probably the most popular player on the entire roster is Malik Washington. He's probably the most widely known player because he's the highly rated quarterback. And he's probably not even going to play. Well, he'll play.
Yeah.
Well, he'll play. And there's going to be a competition between him and Justin Martin. We'll see how that plays out. But so he'll play, but I don't think he'll be the starter to start the year.
Yeah.
So
a lot of new faces. You're going to have that same problem of who's the star, who's going to get fans in the seats. But some enthusiasm, some excitement too. And I think warranted excitement for sure.
The excitement is all around recruiting.
Yeah.
Hey, they got this great class coming, great for Maryland. Again, if Ohio State got the 25th ranked class, they'd be firing the coach. For Maryland, it's very good.
Yeah.
And not only that, they're on the great start to be backing it up again for 26. And like I said, if you have some patience and they can keep stacking up 8 or 10 of these 4 and 5 star guys a year, in 3 to 4 years, you've got a top 25 roster. Can they play to that?
Yeah, that's the big,
right.
Yeah, that's the big it. A couple of friends of the show, Mish, Mike Locksley, very good recruiter, bringing in top 25 classes at Maryland is a miracle. Agreed.
It's not a miracle. They got money now.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Locksley has always been a good recruiter. They've been in the low 30s, and now they've got money. So they're going to be in the top 20, could be top 20 next year even, maybe. We'll see.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. The Penn State guy also has a few comments here. He says, will they hold on to Ely? We talked about that a little bit. Kevin Plank keep dishing out money. And then he says they are slight leaders for Emmanuel Henacho, the number 1 OT.
I think they're more than slight leaders. He might be a silent verbal.
Really?
Maybe. There's rumors about that. I don't know. I'm not breaking any news by saying that. There's rumors about it. I think they're more than slight leaders. Okay. But Ely, when he signed, we all have the same thought, trust me. Right? I know the Penn State guy is kind of dumping on Maryland a little bit with that, but we all have the same thought, right? Is he going to stay? But I think he is, because multiple times since then he's reiterated, I'm going to Maryland. I'm going to Maryland. I'm going to Maryland. He said it multiple times. And there's some people who just want to play close to home, right? And and they leave because X program, whatever one you call, blue blood, has all this money and prestige and history, and you can't say no to the money that's being offered. But now Maryland can counter it, and they don't even necessarily have to match it exactly. They can get close, and close is good enough for someone who wants to stay home, and especially because everyone loves Mike Locksley and they want to go play for him. And he's the central figure of the DMV area. Like, everyone loves Mike Locksley. So he gets players that most coaches wouldn't get. And now you give him money.
Yeah, so, that is a game changer. It really is. Let's end on, you had messaged us, it's probably early on when we were talking about your conversation with the AD who's on his way out, I believe, right?
He's gone now. Yeah.
He's gone. Yeah. And then you had a conversation with him about NIL. Kind of bring us all into that conversation, and what stood out to you from that conversation?
So this was a really good episode. It was about 4 to 5 weeks ago now, I think. If you guys, I think anyone who's go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to say, can you after the show send us the link to that one
Yeah,
so we can
I
put it in
will.
the show notes?
I think everyone who's a college football junkie will like to watch that. Now, at least half the questions are Maryland centric, but probably half are about broader things, NIL and transfers and the future of the Big Ten, and the Big Ten and SEC coaches all met together. What was that about? And right, so it was a really great conversation, and actually, sort of to piggyback on the things we're talking about, reasons for optimism for Maryland. If you guys know, Maryland, when they left the ACC, were at a big deficit financially. Is one of the biggest reasons. It's why everybody's leaving for the Big Ten SEC for money, right? Maryland was the first to do it, which caused the ACC to sign that guarantee of rights, by the way. But they have a 12-year plan with the Big Ten where they borrowed money to pay for the buyouts and all of that. And not only that, they weren't getting a full share when they started. That's a 12-year process. Maryland hasn't been getting a full share in the Big Ten. That's over fiscal year 27. So Maryland's about to start getting a full share of the Big Ten as well. That in addition to the house settlement money. So that was part of that conversation as well with Damon. But in terms of NIL and transfers, I asked him about, for example, will there be a collective bargaining agreement? Is there going to be player contracts, multi-year player contracts and things like that? And he said that is something that he thinks is going to happen. And you can hear his words exactly if you go watch it. But and I've been saying this as soon as the NIL and transfer stuff started 3, 4 years, 5 years ago, whenever that was. I said, this is coming. They have to. They cannot continue in this manner because it's for some people, it's already killed the game. There's a lot of people who hate it. And a lot of coaches have left, right? There's all these things. Everyone agrees, or most people agree, that the players were getting the short end of the stick for a very long time and they were not getting their full value. And so legally and otherwise, they weren't being fairly compensated. So, but now I think maybe people think it swung maybe a little far to the other way. So a lot of the questions with him were about that and how can it change back so there's some more structure. Maryland in particular is a program where a player comes in, you watch him, and he starts to perform, and you start to bond with the player and like him. Oh, there he goes. He's off to Chop Robinson, off to Penn State. Right? Sean Barham off to Michigan, right? That's a killer. That is a killer for a fan base. And how do you prevent that from happening? So there was a lot of questions about that in the Big Ten as a whole, the future of the Big Ten. So I think a lot of people would like that.
Yeah. Well, we will put it in the show notes when this show is released. It's live right now, but when we releases on YouTube, we'll go in and edit it. But if you can send that to us, that'd be great. We'd love to listen.
Yep.
Dave is a Michigan fan, I believe, and he said Barham is a beast. So
wasn't there mixed results about his play last year, or is he just a fan? I thought he was kind of mixed results with him, right? Or did he start slow and come on? Maybe
I think it was start slow, but really came on.
Yeah,
I mean they're still pretty excited about him. Jeff McMichael, who's one of our contributors, does a Thursday night show with us. He wrote in, Maryland is capable of having top 25 classes even before NIL. So, which I think was your point, Larry. Like they had the 18th ranked class back in 2017 and 2021, according to 247 Sports Composite, 28th in 2018.
Right.
And then Dave just replying back to the Barham stuff. He's pretty good. So
but the problem with him at Maryland, if we want to dive into the specifics, there became an issue between him and the coaches, and he kind of quit on the team. His sophomore year, he was like, I'm out of here. And it became very clear he was going to leave way before the season was over. And so he did not perform very well his sophomore year at Maryland. And So, but good for him. I don't have anything against the kid. I wish he would have stayed, but
Yeah.
I don't want anything bad to happen to kids. People got to do what's best for them. So,
Yeah.
but
one last question for you. We're shifting to basketball a little bit, but Chris asked this early on. Larry, do you think Buzz Williams has a chance to come to Maryland?
Chance, yes. He's trying. He wants to get out of Texas really badly. And he has been supposedly for days now angling to try to get the Maryland job. Everyone knew Willard was leaving. Don't get me started on Willard. I hate that guy. What he did.
I think a lot of people are. I think JR has been. I think as much as we've been on Locksley, I think he has been far more on Willard than.
Oh my! To sign, he signed a memo of understanding with Villanova a week ago, and then pretended that he was trying to negotiate with Maryland, and he did it publicly, and he trashed the AD, the director, and the athletic department publicly, aired all the dirty laundry publicly, while he had already signed a memo of understanding with Villanova and knew he was going there. And he acted like he was trying to negotiate with Maryland publicly, and it was BS. It was BS. And there's reports he was already recruiting for Villanova portal transfers while he's coaching Maryland in the tournament when they had a legit shot at a Final Four and maybe a title. Who knows? They got blown out by Florida, but if everybody, when things start to go wrong and everybody's leaving, you say, all right, let it go. Who cares? If you're in the fight, maybe they come back. Who knows? Right.
Yeah.
But who knows what would have happened? But for him to be doing that stuff after he knew he was going, man. There's a right way and a wrong way to end relationships, any kind of relationship. And that was the wrong way by a lot.
Yeah. 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 It was not, I feel like from what I've heard from you about Locksley, as much as we'd love to see him perform better in some of those maybe in-game situations,
Mm-hmm.
his love for the football program and how he's rejuvenated them from a health perspective and a healing perspective has far surpassed anything that Willard did. So I think that's where we're going to end is Coach Locksley. I think you've changed my mind a bit on Coach Locksley, and I appreciate that. Hopefully you changed some minds on our show as well. But this has been great, Larry. We really appreciate you educating us on Maryland. Again, remind everybody where we can find you.
Yeah, so the main website is InsideMarylandSports.com, and they're part of the 24/7 Sports Network. The owner is Jeff Ehrman. Our show is associated with that, and Jeff's on the show with us, and it's called IMS Radio, Inside Maryland Sports Radio. We do it live on YouTube, and usually it's Wednesday nights, but we do more than that when necessary if big things are happening, or maybe sometimes we'll decide to do a post-game show if there's a big win, those kind of things. And so subscribers know when that's going to happen. And then it gets rendered down to an audio podcast as well. And you can find that on all the Spotify and iTunes and all that. You can find it in all the places.
Yeah. So you were telling me pre-show 7 shows in 12 days. You've been busy.
Because the tournament's going. We went live after every win, and we went after the loss as well. And it was great because Scott Van Pelt joined us after the wins. And so
no kidding.
He's a regular poster on that message board.
Yeah.
And knows Jeff, the owner, pretty well. He's been on the show 3 other times, but then he came on after both wins, and we were celebrating, and he said he's going to keep coming on after wins because he doesn't want to be the guy who jinxes it, right? So, but then they lost, and he didn't come on that. And then also, obviously, because of the coaching craziness. And so the show's been blowing up, a lot of people watching, and because there's just so much interest. And we'll see what happens with the AD search. And I think the head coaching search is going to get resolved quickly. The AD search is going to take a bit longer. Maybe we'll see. And I'm sure whoever it is, a lot of people are going to hate it. because everybody's got their opinion who it should be. And then we'll just have to see how it goes.
Sounds good. Well, for those of you listening, if you want good Maryland content, make sure you subscribe to IMS Radio, Inside Maryland Sports Radio with Larry France, Jeff Erman. We really appreciate you having you on the show. Again, make sure you guys like and subscribe. Check out the memberships, and we are grateful for y'all. So thanks for listening. We will see you on Tuesday for a live show. JR will be back. Lord willing, he is not taken up by a tornado. So hope you're doing well, JR. We'll see you later. Take care.